Om Sahanavavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sah Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Pranam to all the participants to our second day of IKS-TKDL workshop on traditional knowledge, intellectual property and people's rights. Today, our ma'am, Dr. Vishwajanani Satyagiri, madam, will take today's session and tomorrow Anil sir will take. So, madam is the head of CSIR TKDL unit, Ministry of Science and Technology. Madam, last almost 7 years, Madam is putting her tireless effort to protect, preserve, and promote TK. So, Madam has extensive experience with different companies, pharmaceuticals company and drugs company, and in the area of academia, Madam is scientist H. So we are very happy. We'll listen about the overview of TK. That's the first thing. Then we'll see the significance, the area expanse of TK. Madam will talk about how TK inspired innovations can be done. What is the roadmap, future scope? So we request, ma'am, please start your session. We'll enjoy. And before that, ma'am, we request all the participants, please watch, please complete the session and take the assessment that is mandatory. You have to score 75% marks to get the assessment certificates. And sorry, due to limited limitation in WebEx, only first 1,000 participants can join through this WebEx, and others are requested, please watch YouTube live and complete the assessment. I will share the link in the Google Drive folder which you have received through mail. So that's all. Every updates will be updated, uploaded in the Google Drive. Please, ma'am, please start your session.
Thank you, Pish. Thank you so much, Anil. Namaskar to everybody. So I'm so very happy to be back on this platform. Thank you so much, IKS Division Ministry of Education, for this opportunity to connect on our favorite subject, of course, traditional knowledge. So when we are talking about traditional knowledge, it's important to understand that it has relevance not just of the past, but in the context of our future. So here I am in front of all of you to talk about the overview of the expanse of our traditional knowledge, our heritage, and also touch upon, few examples of innovations that have been based on traditional knowledge. So here I am. So we move forward and to kind of, touch base, I'm sure Professor Murthy had spoken quite well yesterday about the importance of the Indian knowledge systems. Unfortunately, I had a technical issue. I could not open my video nor I could participate very well, but I listened to his entire address. So here the Traditional Knowledge Digital Library is under the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research. We are under the Ministry of Science and Technology. And the TKDL has been initiated as somebody is saying no audio. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're audible, ma'am.
All right. So whoever is not able to listen to me, log out and log in again, or you try your, what do you say, the eardrop, the accessories for your audio. Yeah, so coming back to this, the traditional knowledge started as a collaborative effort between the CSIR and the Department of the Indian Systems of Medicine and Homeopathy, which is now the Ministry of Ayush. It happens to be the first of its kind globally. What is it? It is a database of value-added traditional knowledge. You'll get to hear about the TKDL in the days to come. And you all know you had a detailed lecture yesterday about the Indian Knowledge Systems Division under the Ministry of Education, our collaborator. And if you look at it, the IKS division is also looking towards preserving and disseminating Indian knowledge systems for further research and societal applications, while our main objective from the TKDL is to protect traditional knowledge from misappropriation. And with the changing times, we're also looking towards promoting traditional knowledge for a better livelihood of everyone. So with this common, interest, the IKS division and the Traditional Knowledge Digital Library Unit of the CSIR will join hands into doing this workshop. I'm sure you will find it interesting. So we are now on the 8th workshop, and thanks to Piyush for his, amazing coordination and interest, we have been able to do it effectively over the last several workshops. So this time we have made changes to the workshop schedule. Earlier it was just a 5-day workshop. Now we have extended it to 6 days. So the 5 days of lectures followed by the assessment on the 6th day. Every day you would also have a question and a brief assessment. Please do participate in that. Okay. And in this particular workshop, we have also introduced 2 new sessions, that is on 25th and 26th. So we will have an interactive session on arts and humanities on 25th August and an interactive session on science and technology on 26th August to clear any doubts that you may have. So today we are on day 2, and the topic for today would be the overview of the expanse and significance of traditional knowledge and also TK-inspired innovations, the potential and the role ahead. So yesterday you had a very detailed and a wonderful lecture by Professor Murthy. He talked about the essence of our Indian heritage in terms of our knowledge, and how fortunate we are in terms of having such kind of the understanding of not just the nature around it, but also using that knowledge for human development. So when we talk of the traditional knowledge of India, we are looking at the codified knowledge, which is in the form of text. So it could be the Vedas, the Upanishads, many of the novels, and also the systems of medicine, the poetry, of course, food, agriculture, and many more. And what is all very, interesting about it is when we talk of our country, we talk about unity and diversity, and that's very applicable even into our knowledge systems, because it's not only the diversity of the knowledge systems, but it is also the diversity of languages, the culture, the traditions, and all unifying to provide us a valuable heritage. So when we talk of traditional knowledge of India, we've been very fortunate because our ancestors have been able to record their knowledge in the form of manuscripts, which later have now turned into books today. But there is again a very, very distinct vertical of traditional knowledge in India, and that is the oral traditional knowledge. If you look at many of our elders, there's not much of knowledge that has been recorded in writing. It's all verbal. So this oral knowledge has been transferred from one generation to the other by mere word of mouth. And this still happens to be a very, very strong way of imbibing our traditions and cultures over many, many and thousands of years. And of course, we are also fortunate, as I mentioned, our ancestors recorded all their knowledge in manuscripts, and under the National Mission for Manuscripts, we have been able to document several such lakhs of manuscripts, almost about 45 lakhs, and they have also digitized in this particular area of work about 3.3 crore pages of these manuscripts, and many rare and unpublished manuscripts have also been recorded. So this, when you talk of manuscripts, it again occupies a very, very distinct area and interest in the traditional knowledge domain, and you will get to hear again about those manuscripts in the days to come when we are talking in detail about protection of traditional knowledge, what is codified traditional knowledge, what is not or undisclosed oral traditional knowledge, and many more terminologies you'll get to learn. At the importance today, what I wanted to convey to all of you is about the value that our knowledge systems hold. When we talk of traditional knowledge and indigenous knowledge or Indian knowledge systems, we are using all these terminologies interchangeably because it all means the same. It is all about the values that we have inherited from our ancestors. If you go back to education systems of our country, in our ancient days, and especially when you talk about our sutras and all that, you would understand that our ancestors have been very clear about what forms knowledge. And when you talk of the Nyaya, Pramana, Shastra, it is a science of correct knowledge. And our ancestors have mentioned that, knowing is based on 4 conditions. That is Pramatra, that is subject, object of Prameya. So this is a process of recognition and it is directed. Cognition is pramiti and pramana is the nature of knowledge. And how do you arrive at the pramana? So you need to know what is correct knowledge, right? So what they are saying is observational skills have been extremely important in our olden days. So there is pratyaksha, that is direct perception. Anumana is inferring something. Upamana is drawing analogy. And shabda is the verbal testimony. In fact, the importance of all of this, is also mentioned in the systems of medicine, which we are dealing at the traditional knowledge digital library. So, for example, Acharya Charaka in his Samhita says, use of logic in medicine is as essential in other subjects. Okay. And Shushruta, again, the Acharya Shushruta is very well known for his surgical abilities in our ancient days. He talks about the interdisciplinary approach to, looking at problems and arriving at solutions. In fact, Shushruta says that, just being a physician is not enough. One cannot rely on our skills by learning only one science. Okay, he needs to go beyond. So here, in the context of systems of medicine, Shushruta says that, the person should be good at Ayurveda, and also he also needs to understand medicinal plants that are growing in the forest. So he should be a good botanist, a taxonomist, or whatever you may want to call it. So you need to have this interdisciplinary skills and also use logic and rationale to arrive at something meaningful. So if you look at our systems of medicine going forward with the example that I had talked about, Acharya Charaka and Acharya Shushruta, you look at the traditional systems of medicine and it is really very diverse and vast. In fact, you have the classical systems of medicine, namely Ayurveda, you have Siddha, which is largely practiced in Tamil Nadu and Kerala. Then you have Unani, which is largely in Arabic, Persian, and Urdu. And you also have Sovarikpa, which is largely practiced in the northern Himalayan regions of the country. And of course, yoga provides for both health and wellnesses. And again, as I said, the beauty of our traditional knowledge is about the diversity of not just the knowledge, but also the languages. So yesterday I did see that many of you had, mentioned where do we get information about all these our traditional knowledge. If you look at many of the sites, including the Indian knowledge systems, they have mentioned many books that fall under specific subject areas. If you look at the TKDL website, because we document traditional knowledge from the aspects of Indian systems of medicine, you will find many of the books that we have got. We have digitized in the TKDL, and you will also understand who the publishers are, when was it published, and so on and so forth. So just talking about Ayurveda, again, this is a system of medicine that has been practiced maybe 5,000, 6,000 years ago. And if you look at it, if you look at the Charak Samhita, I'm giving you just one particular example. This particular book contains about 120 chapters. It was written by, of course, these dates are questionable, but going by the larger consensus, what has been believed is that it has been put forward by Acharya Atreya. Thereafter, Charaka had brought everything together. That's the Samhita that he put together with the help of, again, later on with Ridhavala. And the key principles that he addresses in this particular Samhita is that the first one is a diagnosis, that is about the disease and the symptoms. He also talks about the etiology, that is the causes of the disease, pathology and pathophysiology, that is the effects of the disease on the body, and the treatment modalities and how to control the diseases. In fact, if you look at the sections, again, you would be quite surprised about the perhaps, in today's context, it may appear unscientific, but even when you look at, the details of the books, you would see how scientific they have been within whatever have been the means or infrastructure that they had at that point of time. So looking at the sections, you have Sutrasthana, that is talking about the fundamental principles of Ayurveda. Vidanasthana is the diagnostic principles. Vimanasthana is a specific medical principles associated with Ayurveda. Sharirasthana is a human being and genesis. Indriya is about sensorial. Chikitsa is about therapy. And Kalpasthana is about the pharmaceutical, about the pharmaceutical preparation, and Siddhisthana is about the therapeutic procedures. You can understand that, when we talk of the Indian systems of medicine, say, one example, Ayurveda, it is all about, giving not only the details of just the drugs and the plants that are being used in Ayurveda, but it also talks about right from the principles of diagnosis, understanding the symptoms, what is the cause of the disease, identifying the pathophysiology associated with it, and then coming into the modalities of treatment. So just moving forward, when you take again, specific examples of Ayurveda, you would know that Triphala is a very well-known drug formulation in Ayurveda. Triphala is about bringing three fruits together, a combination of three fruits, that is Amla, Bibitaki, and Haritaki, Embolica, Officinalis, Terminalia Bellerica, and Terminalia Cebula. And the beauty of Ayurveda is that you have that one single drug, depending on what the carrier is. Say, for example, if I take Triphala with sugar, it is known for the treatment of acid peptic disease. If I take Triphala with honey, it is good for kapha diseases. If I take it with oil, it is for non-healing ulcers. I can use it as a face pack. I can also use it as Triphala as a powder for sensitive gums. And when I take Triphala with ghee and honey, it is an eyesight promoter. So this is, as I mentioned, the vastness of our Indian systems of medicine can be visualized through that. So there is nothing like arbitrary and something, just popping out in some books saying that these are our traditions in medicine. You would see how well they have been played out. Again, another example of a single plant. Here I give an example of Kudichi, that is Stenospora cordifolia. And again, depending on the carrier, whether you take it with ghee or you take it with honey or you take it with jaggery or with ginger, it is meant for specific diseases. Say, for example, with ghee, it is about Vata Vikara. If I take it with ginger, it is for Amavata. So there are specific, formulations with specific carriers for specific diseases. So this is all well laid out in the text that we have of Ayurveda. Again, if I talk about one particular disease, say vitiligo, everybody knows vitiligo is a skin disorder. There's a lot of social stigma associated with it because, it is a complete loss of melanocytes. There are patches of skin. And, it kind of becomes a little uncomfortable to have vitiligo and move about confidently in the society. So if you go back to our systems of medicine, be it Ayurveda or Unani or Siddha, or even homeopathy that originated in Germany, you have specific treatments. So for example, if I talk of Ayurveda, there is a quat, that is decoction made out of Ficus hispida, Pterocarpus marsupium, and so on and so forth. And similarly, you have a lot of herbal formulation, herbal mineral formulations, and so on for the treatment of vitiligo. Not only that, even if you look at local traditions, when I talk of the Indian systems of medicine, I have been largely referring to Ayurveda, Siddha, Unani, Sovarikwa, and so on. But we also have a clear vertical in terms of the folk medicines of the local health traditions. So there are treatments for vitiligo within these local treatments. Say, for example, a particular community uses powdered radish seeds along with vinegar for the treatment of vitiligo. So again, this speaks about the expanse of our traditional knowledge in terms of addressing our healthcare needs. Again, India has always been a beauty conscious country, I would say. Our ancestors have been very, very observant and also very, conscious of the need for hygiene, sanity, and also beauty. So if you look at the Sashangra Hridaya Uttarasthana, you find treatments that are mentioned for pimples, about premature graying of hair growth promotion. And again, if you look at it, these are all local resources, plants that have grown in that particular region. For example, if I talk of pimples, they have used a paste from Rodhra, Kustumbura and Pacha. And again, they have also used tender leaves of Vata and Narikela Sukti in the treatment of the pimples. Hair growth promotion, again, based on herbs, the plants that have grown in the region. Premature graying of hair, again, it is a polyherbal along with the black mud, and they use even the juice of sugarcane, and this helps helps in the premature graying of hair. Again, as I said, we have been not only a health conscious country, we have also been a country which is conscious of hygiene, sanitation, and also beauty, and traditions to play a very, very important role when we talk about all these aspects. So, for example, if I talk of Varahami's Brihat Samhita, about the perfumery combinations, they talk about Karpura. Karpura is camphor, and you know that it is volatile. So in the process that they mentioned towards the preparation of it, whatever has been volatile have been added at the end. So there has been a clear scientific rationale with which these perfumes have also been prepared, again, by our ancestors several thousand years ago. When we talk of agriculture, because when you talk of medicines, I had mentioned largely it has been based on local resources, and largely plants have been used for our health and wellness. And when you talk of plants, you cannot but talk about traditional agriculture as well. So when we talk about traditional agriculture, again, like the systems of medicine, you have many, many classical texts related to agriculture. This includes Krishi Parashara, Kautilya Arthashastra, Brihat Samhita, and you also have many books like Kashyapa Krishi Shukti, Surapala's Vriksha Ayurveda, Chabantaraya, Lokopakara, and many other books as well. Not only that, again, as I mentioned, when we talk of our Indian systems of medicine, Indian knowledge systems, there is the codified knowledge, and there is also the oral knowledge. So what the Indian Council of Agricultural Research, that is ICAR, had done is that they had inventorized a lot of these local practices. They called it indigenous technical knowledge in agriculture, and they brought out about 7 volumes of books related to these indigenous practices that are carried out by our farmers. ICAR also validated many of these indigenous technical knowledge practices in agriculture in cross-sectoral and as well as single-center experiments, and they have been able to find that many of our traditional practices that are being carried out by our farmers are almost as good as the contemporary practices, and perhaps with some minor benefits, and there are some which lack the kind of benefits that you see with the contemporary practices. So when you talk of the traditional agriculture, one needs to understand it's very vast. It includes crop husbandry, it includes animal husbandry, and also the fisheries. And if you look at all the texts that I had mentioned previously, be it Surapala's Vriksha Ayurveda, Kashyapa Krishi Shukti, or Krishi Parashara, and many of this, and if you look at the whole, all the books and the information content in it, see, when I talked about Charaka Samhita, I had mentioned all the sections and the Sutrasthanas and so on and so forth, right? Here, when you look at agriculture, you would see there's so much information related to our traditional agriculture, right from understanding the rainfall and the seasons and the lands and what should be the sowing and farm operations, what is important from nourishment and growth perspective, and say a plant is affected by disease, what would be the treatments that is, that should be provided to the plants and as well as the animals. We also talk about storage and preservation and the soil types and the preparation and also the water resources, cattle management, and so on and so forth. We also talk about, the landscape and the, architecture associated with it. It talks about planting trees near the house, laying out gardens, horticultural wonders, and so on and so forth. And also in terms of, the traditions and culture that we have been following since many thousands of years, prayers, portents, offerings, and also astrology form a very, very critical aspect of our traditional agriculture. So I'll just give you one particular example of Kunapajala. Kunapajala has been mentioned in both Rishi Parashara as well as Vriksha Ayurveda books. And if you look at Kunapajala, it is the oldest fermented liquid manure. And what is Kunapajala? It is basically, when you look at it, it is a filthy liquid. It is made out of the waste that is there in the farmer's land. And so when you look at it, the original Kunapajala mentioned in Rishi Parashara or Vriksha Ayurveda has been made by animal bones. As I said, basically the waste from the farmer's field, animal bones, marrow, blood, fish, sesame cake, germinated oat grain, rice husk, honey, ghee, they are all fermented and it is used as a biofertilizer as well as a growth promoter. With time, there have been innovations made on this original Kunapajala mentioned by our ancestors. And in 2004 and as well as in 2012, a herbal Kunapajala had been developed. And this herbal Kunapajala removed all the animal components, the waste from the farmer's field, but instead used weeds that could contribute to the fungicidal and insecticidal properties of this particular biofertilizer. And the Asian Agri-History Foundation, which has been founded by Professor Y.L. Nene, this particular foundation looked at testing this particular Kunapajala, the herbal Kunapajala, across different crop varieties. Say, for example, vegetables, fruits, field crops, even tea, and they found that by using Kunapajala, the productivity increases about 20 to 30%. So there is a lot of value in our traditional practices, especially in the context of today where we are talking about pesticides, insecticides on our vegetables, fruits, and even all other food materials. So if you look at Kunapajala, I had mentioned to you only the old one that has been mentioned in the text and the herbal Kunapajala. But if you look at literature, it is much more vast. You have the in-safari Kunapajala that is made out of safari fish and cow urine. You have Mushika Kunapa, Kukuta Kunapa, which is made of chicken, Saraknatara Kunapajala, which includes many, animal parts as well as the plant parts. You also have the Shashikabhya Kunapajala, which is made of cow dung, cow urine, weed, and plant parts. And not only that, much of these different varieties of Kunapajala have been tested on field by our scientists. I have given even the years of when they have been tested, and every of the Kunapajala formulation that was tested had a good productivity increase over the controls. So this kind of validates that our traditional practices, are relevant today, even today. Of course, there is a need for validation to kind of reinforce the validity of the practice. But with having said that, it's not just mere sentiments and perhaps just our feelings for our traditional practices and heritage that goes towards speaking about the value of our traditional knowledge systems. Again, moving on with the agricultural practices, you talk of Vriksha Ayurveda, they talk about improving seed germination. So one will wonder, why are we talking about seed germination? Is it so very important? As people coming from this field of agriculture would appreciate, there we do have plants which have very hard seeds. So the pericarp of these seeds is very hard. So it is very difficult to germinate these seeds. So if you want to have good plant growth, you need to have a good method that helps germinate these seeds. So here from Berkshire, where here is an example where they have been able to germinate seeds like tamarind and others which have hard pericarps by mixing it with powder of triphala. I did mention triphala earlier in Ayurveda for human afflictions. Here, triphala is also used for plant health. Sesame, barley, and as well as black gram, and then we also use turmeric in this particular formulation. Another example from the Varahamira's Brihat Samhita is about grafting. So I was personally very surprised with this grafting because I thought this grafting is much more of a recent innovation by our scientists. So way back, in the very early years, our ancestors have been able to transport plants from one place to the other by grafting. So here the trees can be taken to other countries. They're grafted on others if they are smeared from the root to the stem with ghee, antapagon, sesame, honey, vidanga, milk, and powder. So this again talks about, not just merely the observational skills, but also the experimental skills and the actual practices that have been put in place by our ancestors. So moving on, when you talk of agriculture, it's not just the crop husbandry that is important. It is the animal husbandry also that is very important. And here I would like to give you an example of the indigenous practice, why that is the oral traditional knowledge of our farmers that is prevalent even today. So there is a particular place in Orissa called the Navapada district, and the farmers of this particular district, especially from this Makarvali village, they use the combination of harida and behda powder, and they apply it for taking care of the foot and mouth disease in cattle. So when you talk about this particular formulation, one may wonder whether it is because foot and mouth disease in cattle is highly prevalent, and one could be wondering by just a application of a herbal formulation, would it be effective enough to take care of this disease? So the validation happened, and this was conducted by the ICAR. And here, the organizations that are associated with this particular study was the West Bengal University of Animal and Fishery Sciences and the KBK of Kalahandi, Bhavanipatna, Orissa. So what did they do? The scientists looked at 5 groups of animals, and among the 5 groups, one is the untreated control, the other 4th way, one was the, this particular formulation of harida and behda powder. The 3rd group was using a paste of the root box of the Kerala tree. The 4th one was applying neem oil. And the 5th one was the conventional treatment, that is Baxivet, that is used for the foot and mouth disease in cattle. And after doing all these experiments with appropriate control, they found that the harida and behda was found to be as effective in controlling the foot and mouth disease in cows and buffaloes in comparison with the conventional therapy, that is Baxivet. So the difference was that while the animals took 5 to 6 days to recover using the ITK method, by using the conventional therapy of Baxivet, they were able to recover in 4 to 5 days. But when you look at the cost effectiveness, this particular harida and behda was found to be better. Similarly, even in the context of fisheries, the farmers, have been using banana pseudostems to increase the, not only the oxygen content, but also in terms of, minerals, of making the required pH, addressing the hardness and alkalinity of the pond water. And with this increased pH, oxygenation, plankton production, and having a better sunlight, they've been able to increase the productivity of fish. So this is being again, this particular method is being followed in the Bastar village of Orissa. We talked about agriculture, so all of you know water is extremely important when you talk of agriculture, when you talk of health and wellness, and many, many other aspects of life, not just of human beings, but others as well. So when you look at the water conservation methods, every region in our country had specific methods and frameworks for conserving water. So they were all largely dependent on collecting rainwater and floodwaters. And also they had, installed appropriate structures and methods based on the climate, the rainfall, the geographical region, the local materials, the soil, and so on and so forth. I'll not go into the details of what I have put in the slide, but to say that when we talk of the water conservation method, it all differs. So, for example, when you talk of Trans-Himalayan, especially Ladakh region, you have small tanks that collect melted glacier water through the channels. When you talk of Western Himalayas, again, you will have water channels, ponds, and also, structures carved out of hard rock, and also building temporary head walls. When you come down, to the islands, you will have different methods of conserving water. So here they have pits collecting rainwater. They have bunds that, logs of hard wood, and water collection is made in pits. Split bamboos are also used, and so on and so forth, depending on the region. In the northeastern hill ranges, you had bamboo drip irrigation largely practiced. Again, when you come to the ghats or the coastal regions, again, there are very different ways by which the water is collected and conserved. And of course, you would have all heard about the Mohenjo-daro way. We had steppers, and the steppers these days, I'm really very happy to see they're being cleaned across Rajasthan and Gujarat to reclaim our ancestral heritage. So these are all the different methods when you talk about agriculture, water conservation methods, and so on and so forth. So moving on, in the context of agriculture and water, you would understand that food and nutrition is also extremely important. And again, even in this case of food and nutrition, you have specific text from related to our ancient practices. You have the Pakadarpanam by Maharaja Nala, Supashastra by Mangarasa, Bhojana Kutuhala by Raghunatha Ganesha, Kshema Kutuhala by Kshema Sarvam, and Shivatatra Ratnakara Vyasaraja. Again, I'll give you one particular example of one book, Kshema Kutuhala, and if you look at it, this particular book is largely on the Pakashastra, Pakakala, that is dietetics and culinary art. And again, the information is so very well laid out. It has 12 utsavas, that is chapters. The first one talks about the different types of dravya pakas. It talks about the utensils for cooking. It talks about the qualities of the physician and cook. It talks about the seasons and the routines to follow. It talks about the dinacharya, that is daily routine that needs to be followed. It talks about non-vegetarian cooking, meat or even fish. It also talks about different types of vegetables that can be cooked, preparations from the flours, about foodstuffs, appetizers, and also dairy products and drinks. And when you talk of the Pakadarpanam, again, you have, very important information from these texts. It talks about, how dal has been prepared, what have been the ingredients. And also, when you talk about it, they also talk about not just about the food preparations, it is also about, the other ingredients that you add to make it not more tasty, fragrant, and also very appealing to look at. Okay, so you can see how advanced things had been even in the past when it comes to food and nutrition. Similarly, there are very specific practices when we talk about food and nutrition. I did mention about this particular book, the Kshema Kutuhala, that talked about different utensils being used for different preparations. And here again, we are talking about different utensils. It could be, based on clay, it could be based on metal, or it could be even stones, and so on and so forth. And also the eating formats, whether you eat it on a plantain leaf or you eat it on a plate, everything has been well defined. And in many of the cases, the rationale for using any particular leaf is also associated with the health-related aspects. Say, for example, plantain leaf, while it is mentioned to be, a very cordial way of eating, it is also known to stimulate the digestive fire. It is useful when you are very tired and gout. So there is some health aspects also associated with the eating formats. So I did talk about, so far about agriculture. Of course, I started with the Indian systems of medicine. I touched upon agriculture, the different crop husbandry, animal husbandry, We talked about fisheries, we talked about water conservation methods, we talked about food and nutrition, and in the context, we talked about utensils, and I did mention metals in the process of utensils. So when we talk of metallurgy, yet again, India had been, having very advanced technologies used in our very ancient times by our ancestors. Right from, Rig Veda to many other books, specific books like Rasaratna Samuchaya, Arthashastra, Rasarnava, Charak Samhita, Shushat Samhita, metals, minerals have all been used, and there are specific mentions. Of course, here when we talk of metallurgy, we do not have focused texts like that of the systems of medicine or agriculture or even food, but you do have mentions of metallurgy in all of these books. I'd like to give you only one particular example, a couple of examples from metallurgy that talks about the amazing qualities that are or the workmanship that our ancestors had, and these are largely people who have not been formally educated. So, for example, the wood steel, it is also called the ukku steel, and it has largely been associated with the southern India. Some people say it is from Tamil Nadu, some people say it is from Karnataka, and some people say some parts of Andhra. Nevertheless, it is to say that, it has been the blacksmiths who have been associated with the wood steel preparation. So how is it prepared? Today, wood steel is regarded as, ultra high grade, ultra high carbon steel, and it is made by a crucible process, during our ancient times. So here the porous iron is prepared, they hammer it while it is still hot to release the slag, then they add wood chips in the clay container while breaking the slag, and then they reheat it. So what happens in the reheating is that the carbon from the wood is absorbed into the iron, and by this repeated process, what finally emerges out is steel that has a uniform composition of 1 to 1.6 carbon in it, and this particular steel could be heated and forged into bars for later use. So in fact, the Damascus sword, the Damascus sword is again a very, very important artifact from our ancient times, and this particular Damascus sword is known to cut a silk scarf as is easily as human head or even the wood box. So this particular Damascus sword has been made out of this wood stream that was prepared by none other than our blacksmiths from the southern India. Again, I give you an example of the metallurgical prowess from the country in terms of the alloys, and this is specifically from Kerala, the bronzes from Kerala. It is an example of what is called the Aradmula metal mirror. Today, all of us use the glass mirrors, but if you look at the Aradmula metal mirror, there's no glass used. It is all made up of metal, and this is made by using the casting root. It contains tin, it contains zinc, it contains phosphorus, iron, nickel, and copper. Similarly, you have Kadavallur eating bowl, and this is made by repeated thermomechanical processing. When you lock Swami Malay or Mannar icons or even the bells, it is made by the lost wax process. And if in case you look at all of it, you would see that the earliest evidence of brass in India contained about 70% of copper, 6% of zinc, and 0.9% iron. So in fact, this is one of the, the best benchmarks of brass from the country and also globally. So this talks about the progress of Indians in metallurgy. And when you talk of metallurgy, very often it is also associated with the architecture in the country. I give you yet again one particular example of the Brihadishwara temple from Tanjavur. It is not only, an example of architectural excellence, but it also talks about, the information within. In fact, if you go to the IGNCA website, you would find a multimedia presentation on the Brihadishwara temple, and it speaks about the huge linga, which is the main object of worship in this particular temple. It also talks about the sculptures that are there at different levels of the Vimana and the temple. It also talks about the different dance karanas, especially of the Bharata's Natya Shastra. And of course, not everything was there. There were only, 81 of the dance karanas of the 108 that is mentioned in the Natya Shastra. It is not just that, big, huge architectures that were very important. You would see that, the much more humble monasteries, that is the Tabo Mud Monastery at Spiti Valley, it still stands. It is a 10th century building. It's a mud building. And what is it made of? Cob, that is raw earth, water, and fibrous materials like straw. This is a classical example of a sustainable architecture. Of course, the frescoes and the tankas have become old, but this particular monastery, even today, is called the Ajanta of the Himalayas. There is one another very simple and a humble structure from the country that I'd like to talk about. It is the traditional Bungas. And this is largely from the Gujarat region. So when the deadly earthquake happened in 2001 in Burj, how did the state respond to it? How was the rebuilding happening in Burj? So the bungas were, set up, they were built. And what does the bungas contain? It is just again mud bricks, and the interior of the particular house or the hut is made of a matrix of tree branches. Sometimes they use ring beams to kind of provide you the stability in the structure. And this particular structure can be created very quickly. So after the Burj, every family were given 2 bungas. Almost 1,400 houses were built. And the same thing was repeated even in the 2008 Kosi floods in Bihar, where about 15,000 houses, that is the bungas, were built, and the rebuilding happened very quickly. So moving quickly again, we talked about largely science and technology, architecture, and so on and so forth. There's also the cultural expressions that are very important when we talk of traditional knowledge. So when you talk of the art and culture, we have many, and across not just these states, even the smaller regions within the states that have very specific qualities. For example, the Ipan art, the Assamese miniature painting, the Kondapalli Bommalu, the Matani Pachadi, Meenakari painting, Mughal painting, Mysore Bhanji art, so on and so forth. There are so many of them. And in fact, this particular article talks about, identifying the 52 most incredible art forms, and that we need to protect it in order to keep the traditions and culture alive. So one again, I think in yesterday's discussion, you said, how can, a performing art be used even in today's context? In fact, it's not just in today's context, even in our earlier times, the performing arts has been used as a mode of communication, as a means of communication, especially very important aspects such as health, environment, literacy, family planning, women empowerment, men empowerment, social harmony, agriculture, and so on and so forth. So again, in this particular slide, I give you examples of Yakshagana, which is a folk art form from Karnataka. In this particular case, they had used this particular Yakshagana to create or communicate about the environmental consciousness. Again, Bharatanatyam is again well known across the country. And in this particular example, they talk about, evolving. It is all about women empowerment, the Yashodhara, about Buddha, and what happens with his wife. Another example that comes from the music therapy. Of course, in today's context, we are in a very highly competitive world. In fact, there is a particular article today in the news that says most of the people, they had, I think, tested about 350 people in Hyderabad, especially from the ICT, and most of them had, fatty liver because of the sedentary jobs that they were doing. Very often, it's not just the sedentary jobs, even the stress pulls us down. And you would have heard from your, your grandparents that, listen to some music, listen to some shlokas, listen to some verses, and it would calm you down. In fact, in this particular article, it talks about the Indian classical musical therapy as a therapeutic tool to, help us overcome the stress. And of course, in all of this, when you talk of performing arts, when you talk of science and technology, and many more, language becomes extremely important. And in fact, a particular article of 2020 says that there are 600 potentially endangered languages in the country. Again, thanks to the Government of India, the Ministry of Tribal Affairs, they have identified about 82 language primers which need to be developed, and they have mentioned which of the tribes are associated with that particular language, and there are efforts being made by the Government of India to ensure that we do not lose out on the languages that have been developed over so many years. Again, when we talk about our Indian ancestral knowledge, our heritage, we have also extremely good in governance and administration. Today, when they talk about Arthashastra, they talk about management and the political strategies. In fact, I think we Indians appreciate our own traditions, lesser compared to the people outside of the country. So I give you one particular example of Arthashastra, which has been, written by Kautilya, and this particular book, it talks about the importance of maintaining the right balance between the welfare of the people and augmenting the resources of the state. So it is all about governance and administration. So the manuscript, the original manuscript was found by Dr. Shama Sastri from Mysore, and he went about translating this Arthashastra from Sanskrit into English. And if you look at it, every time a new edition was brought about, it was largely being exported to countries outside of India, especially to the US. So, in fact, he says for the publication of this fourth edition, shortage of paper and other printing materials were the main cause of delay. Anyway, by the direct and indirect cooperation of many of my friends, this book was presented to the public once again. So this is the value of our Indian heritage systems. And here again, I talked about it, the different sections, the different aspects that are covered in our book. It just cannot be that, we are talking about Indian heritage only in the context of superstitions and blind beliefs. If you look at the, contents and the context of the text, it is extremely rational, extremely logical. It is all about, of course, when you talk of medicine, when you talk of anything that has evolved over time, validation, R&D become important. But here we have a foundation that we can rely upon. So here again, coming back to Kautilya's Arthashastra, as I mentioned, it is all about governance and as well as administration. So in fact, somebody says Arthashastra is an art of and science of governance, diplomacy, and war. And there are 4 sciences that are mentioned in this particular book. That is Anvishaki, that is metaphysics or logical philosophy. It's about the science of inquiry. Then it also talks about the triple Vedas, that is Trani, Varti, agriculture, cattle breeding and trade, and there's Dandaniti, that is the science of government. So in all of this, what is of extremely important to us here is about Anvishaki, that is most beneficial, keeps the mind firm, bestows excellence of foresight, speech, and action. It is the light of all kinds of knowledge. So if you look at it, there are different sections in the book, and every chapter in the book offers a huge knowledge for us that we can take forward. Again, when you talk of the Nyaya Shastras of Gautama, it talks about the science of reasoning with epistemology and logic. And of course, when you talk of much of our books on philosophy, it is the ultimate purpose is about salvation, getting rid of all this materialistic interest and going towards salvation by overcoming pain and greed. So in this case, he talks about 16 categories. That is, I did mention a few of it earlier on also, the Pramana, Prameya, Samshaya, Prayojana, Siddhanta, Drishtanta, and so on and so forth. And if you look at it again, you will see that, this is all about using rational, it is all about using logic in arriving, understanding, the nature around us, understanding the problem at hand, and arriving at a solution to address the problem that we have at hand. So when we talk of traditional knowledge systems, you would be wondering as to why are we talking about it today? Cannot it be just a matter of, archival, a matter of heritage that we take pride in and leave it at that? And the answer is a clear no, because when we talk of development, this development happened while all these things practices and innovations were evolving, and they have also been a very critical part of this growth and development. So when we talk about this as a second aspect of our talk today, we are now going to focus on traditional knowledge inspired innovations. And when we especially talk today about the sustainable development goals, this is again going to be very, very important that we also take into consideration our culture, our heritage, our traditions as core components of the sustainable development. A few quick examples on the traditions and culture and how it has been used in the context of the sustainable development goals. It's not just India, world around. We take a lot of pride in appreciating our traditions and culture and see how we can take it forward towards enabling growth and development. So here, when we talk of goal 1, ending poverty in all its forms, an example from Indonesia, because you would know that Indonesia, the batik textiles is extremely important because it offers, it is a means of economy and growth for the country. So what the country had done is they identified this Pekalongan city, that is the city of batik, and they prioritized this traditional textile sector to contribute to the growth and development. And in the process, what they have also realized is that women employees constitute about 60% of this particular economic sector. So here they are not only addressing the needs of ending poverty, they are also taking care of their economy while also being inclusive towards the women of their country. The second example that I would like to touch upon is goal 2, that is ending hunger and achieving food security and nutrition and sustainable agriculture. We do have this kind of festivals even in our country, especially in the Jharkhand and perhaps Orissa areas. But I would like to give you an example from the Sarfi-Hisar city of Turkey. Here the seed swap festival happens, and what the local producers do is bring their seeds together and they have get together with the other farmers in the region. They share their seeds, they share their practices. They are able to thus not only preserve the traditional practices, but also contribute towards the sustainable food production and consumption. An example from our own country is the National Ayush Mission, where towards ensuring healthy lives, and we are all very well aware that using Ayurveda, Siddha, Unani, and also yoga, we are trying to provide for better access to the healthcare facilities in our country. So even at the primary health care centers, Ayush has been integrated. The fourth one, again, I would like to touch upon is from the architectural perspective and learning. So this is a very nice example from the Jeonju city of South Korea. They have what is called the traditional culture city. So this particular thing is about appreciating our own culture, because this has been kind of going down with the newer generations, because they have, perhaps their interests have been different. So kind of to inculcate the traditions and culture as part of one's life, and also providing education towards enabling this traditional culture city provides a lifelong learning, to not only children, but also to the adults on the importance of traditional buildings, what is intangible heritage associated with it, what are the cultural assets associated with it, and so on and so forth. So our Indian traditions and culture, I did touch upon the Ayush earlier, but to also say that, when you talk of even sports like, chess, Ashtapada, it all originated in India. Of course, there's no controversy associated with, where chess originated from. And here, if you look at it today, chess is a global game. In fact, I think Divya Deshmukh has made us all proud very recently. And you have about almost 2,000 identifiable variants of chess that are available. And the International Chess Day is being celebrated on 20th of July every year since the year 1966. In fact, from the UN, they say that chess offers important opportunities towards attaining the SDGs, because it strengthens education, it realizes gender equality, and it also empowers women and girls, fosters inclusion, tolerance, mutual understanding, and respect. So even a sport like chess can offer, among a lot of opportunities towards enabling growth and development while appreciating our traditions and culture. Again, a quick example. I think I've taken a lot of time, so I'll be try to be as quick as possible. When we talk of traditional knowledge, again, from the system of medicine, quinine is an example. As you all know, malaria has been there since many, many years. In fact, even our ancestors had a lot of problems with malaria. So the traditional legend is more of an oral story that a man in the forest of the Indian forest, drank water from a pool wherein the cinchona trees were growing, and he got better from the fever. He went share that knowledge, and today it has become, the quinine, which is derived from cinchona, has become a cure for malaria. But this is all the story of the past, because when you talk of extracts, it is also associated, whereas with some side effects, because of the way it has been isolated and purified and so on and so forth. And so in 1820, the quinine extract, which was isolated and standardized by the French scientists, by the year 1944, which the story, which was only an oral tradition, became a practice, because synthetic quinine was developed by the American scientists, and that became the way of life in treating malaria. But as you all know, that when we talk of infectious diseases, especially coming from the viruses and bacteria, you develop resistance. And so we all developed resistance against this particular disease using the medicine. So the story of artemisinin comes into picture, again, for malaria. And this is a story which is associated with the Nobel Prize. And this is a story that is associated with traditional Chinese medicine. So again, as the story goes, during the Vietnam War, Vietnam approached China to find a cure for chloroquine-resistant malaria. So the person who was associated with it was Tu Youyou, the person who won the Nobel Prize. And she went back to understanding the traditional medicinal text, and then she found Artemisia annua, which was associated with intermittent fevers, which is a symptom of malaria. She worked on it further and then identified this medicine, artemisinin. And when she won the Nobel Prize, she mentioned this as a gift from the traditional Chinese medicine to the world. But if you look at it, it is not easy. One needs to be patient. The story started in 1967. And if you look at, the Nobel Prize, she won it only in the year 2015. And from 67 to 1972, or even in fact 79, the work was going on. So one needs to have patience when we are working in such domains to ensure that we take it to a logical conclusion. It could be positive, it could not be positive, but it again, unless we work it through the entire exercise, you would not know whether our traditional knowledge is still valid or not. So the rationale and the logic that our ancestors applied should continue to be applied even in the current times. So again, an example from the Australia is this Kakadu plum Gubinji is being known to a particular tribe, that is the Mera tribe from Australia. And an American cosmetic company, took this, and then they made a cosmetic, because it has the highest vitamin C in it. And cosmetics largely use this particular vitamin C to make you look younger. But the unfortunate thing is that they went about patenting it, and nothing went back to the people. So, of course, a researcher went and then informed the Australian Patent Office to say that, this particular patent application has been filed on this particular extract from Kakadu plum, but this is already known to the indigenous community. So the patent office took note of it and they rejected the patent application. But the story continued, because this company, Medicare, continued to make the cosmetic, and because there was no access benefit sharing with the indigenous people of Australia, the benefits did not go back to the farmers. So what they had then done is that they formed an alliance, the North Australia Aboriginal Kakadu Plum Alliance. So all the farmers who are cultivating this Kakadu plum, they come and deposit it. They also are involved in value-added products. So this particular slide talks about the different products that have been developed. And so if in case a company like Mary Kay has to access the Kakadu plum, they have to come to this consortium. So this enables the access and benefit sharing. So the people, the knowledge holders, the communities who have been associated with this Kakadu plum are also benefited by the innovations being made in current times. Another example from food and nutrition, as you all know that food and development along with medicines also evolved with time. If you go to our prehistoric civilization, you see that our ancestors have largely been rice eaters. They had also used different, of course, animals, nuts, fruits, and tubers. But I would like to draw your attention to the fact that even in a prehistoric civilization, there is mention of not just rice but barley, pulses, they call it simbi. So when you talk of the simbi dhanya, it is masa, mudga, and masura, that is kidney beans, black gram, and lentils, along with many other vegetables and fruits. And this continues over the Vedic period, the Sutra periods, and so on and so forth. And coming back to our current times, when you talk of the dhanya varga ahara, in fact, in our ancient times, they say that this dhanya varga, that is based on grains, that is cereals, pulses, and others, it constituted almost 70% of our food intake. And even today, we are also talking about similar things because they say that food from the plant constitutes 80% of our food. So when you talk of Dhanya Varga, today what are we talking of? Siridhanya. And what does Siridhanya contain? Of course, it contains wheat, but it also contains all the millets, the pearl millet, foxtail millet, and all that. And it also contains, all these dhanyas that I had mentioned, that is kidney beans, black gram, lentils, and so on and so forth. So when you look at it, it is a continuum. When we talk of our traditional knowledge, it is a continuum. We evolve with time. We evolve with, what is available at that point of time. It is not to say that, our traditions are very distinct and they are just a matter of the past. We need to ensure that we continue with the traditions while we keep making innovations. So in 2023, the UN declared the particular year as the International Year of Millets. And we've been able to make large strides in it because India leads in the context of millets. So moving on to the turmeric again, you see the number of products, if you look at the product portfolio, it is so vast, it is so wide. And in fact, turmeric is considered as the most versatile spice across all the different spices that are available world over. So you right from, a beverage to food products, it is also used as drops for health and skin. And of course, today we also have turmeric pickle, turmeric halwa, turmeric sweets, and so on and so forth. It is all about diversifying the product portfolio. So it's only our creativity in question. We can move on to generate as much as we can do within, what is available as our traditional knowledge. You take, moving on to the arts and sciences, Ramayana, of course, it started with Valmiki Ramayana. It had 24,000 shlokas in Sanskrit. It is again very descriptive and also very structured. It has a complex meter called the Anushtap. The shlokas are grouped into individual chapters, that is the sargas, and the sargas are grouped into books, that is the khandas. So today, right from the manuscript to the book to different modes of understanding the Ramayana, it could be the murals, it could be the puppetry, it could be the folk art forms, it could also be the theatrical forms, it could be the movies, cinemas, films, TV shows, dance, music, and so on and so forth. So when we talk about Ramayana, it is again the creativity that is important. In fact, I would like to talk about one particular author, that is Shamit Tripathi. He is one of the fastest selling authors from the country. His first book in 2010 was The Immortals of Meluha. Thereafter, he has written 11 books, and all the books have been very widely sold across different parts of the world. And his book has been translated into 20 Indian and international languages. So he was a banker initially, okay, and he had inclination and interest in writing books. So what he did is that he wrote books. The first thing was, of course, rejected, but he kept continuing with his efforts, and it was published in 2010. And quoting him, he says, I continued working till my second book was published and resigned only after my royalty check grew bigger than the salary check. Okay, so this is all about, understanding what is available from our traditions and culture and applying our creativity and innovation to see it just need not be a scientific matter. It could be as important as Ramayana or Mahabharata or any other book that is available. So in fact, many of these books are copyrighted today. So this is the value that one can provide by relying on our own traditions and culture. Again, one particular example from Kashmir is on the carpet weaving. So there, this Kashmiri carpets are very, very valuable, and they use what is called as talim. These are, symbolic codes that one uses to create the patterns in the carpets. Okay, and traditionally it takes more than 6 months to complete a carpet. And if in case there is a mistake made by the artisan, there is a error in the design, it reflects on the carpet that has been created and so on and so forth. So to correct that particular mistake, it's very difficult and time consuming. So because of that particular mistake, the carpet, even after 6 months, sells at a lesser price. So what happened is that they approached and then there was a software that was generated to help design this carpet and also weave the carpet. And when you look at this particular this one, the computer software, it helped create the design and also the creation of the talim codes. And what they had done was that once you had all these codes together, they could see the entire design together, not just the small sections. So this helped in cutting down time on errors and spotting them in advance. So now they are looking at AI to enable this kind of carpet weaving. So today, I think, we are all very lucky because we have government policies that help us take traditional knowledge forward. You have the NEP, I'm not going into the details, but to say the Indian knowledge systems has a very, very important role in taking forward our education and also innovation. The National IPR policy on innovation also talks about traditional knowledge in its vision statement, and you will get to know more about the TKDL in the days to come. You have the UGC, you have the ACTI that talk about mandatory courses in the IKS, and of course you have the IKS division providing you a lot of funding opportunities as well as knowledge to take all of this forward. And in today's context, even in terms of the advancements that we see, we have the Bio E3 policy that talks about taking India forward in terms of biotechnology, that talks about biotechnology for economy, environment, and employment. And here they are very specific to say that this sustainability can happen in diverse ecosystems, utilizing our valuable knowledge of the local communities. Even in the context of IRR, you have regulations that have been brought out by the country. So with all of this, I believe that we can do a lot because they say Vidya Dhanam is the Sarvadhana Pradhanam. So I think if we are able to utilize our traditional knowledge and systems, we will be able to go a long way forward. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. I've taken a lot of time. Thank you for your patience. Thank you.
बहुत धन्यवाद madam. So I just want to say on behalf of our participants, I was just collecting the feedback. So there are many adjectives I would just say on behalf of our participants. Incredible sessions, informative, highly insightful, and rich. This is the rich source of information. This is an eye-opening sessions. So we are very happy, ma'am. So let me complete the assessment quickly. Then we will come back to question and answer session. So it's a short assessment. We request all the participants please complete this. There are 5 MCQs. After completing your assessment, you can type your questions. So we can collect your questions, and if they are unanswered here, so we can address in our interactive session also. So let me put the link in the chat. Yes, we have also uploaded in the Google Drive folder, so you can access that link also. You have another 2 minutes. Please submit your assessment. I hope everyone has submitted. So we request all of you, please put your questions and queries in the chat box so we can address. Come. Ma'am, here is a question. Kindly elaborate on interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, and multidisciplinary approaches. That is the first question. Yes.
Well, interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary are kind of, having an overlap, because when you talk of interdisciplinary, there are two different disciplines coming together to address a particular problem. Say, for example, when I talk of drug discovery and development, I need a chemist to make the molecules and I need a biologist to test the molecules. Okay. So, and we all come together, but it is a single domain of drug discovery and development. Okay, so that is how it goes. When I talk of transdisciplinary, say I develop something in the lab, okay, at a lab scale, say for example, a chemical, okay, that is used as a pesticide or whatever. But when I'm going to planning manufacture of it, there I need some engineering inputs also. So because the pilot plant or even the manufacturing plant needs to enable me to develop this particular product at a scale. So what I need is transdisciplinary inputs where, I get an engineer to contribute to the design of it, to the development of this manufacturing plant. And then I'm able to utilize my knowledge into scaling up this particular product for commercial purposes. So that is what it is. Multidisciplinary is, I can something similar different people come together. So I did give you an example of Ramayana, Mahabharata, and intellectual property, and using multimedia tools to develop a particular product and all that. So what happens is people from different fields come and then develop a single product. So this is what is multidisciplinary, and these are all very loose terminologies. Sometimes they are also used interchangeably.
There is a question: which Ayurvedic treatments suitable for brain pain?
I do not provide any healthcare advice. I'm not a doctor. I'm a scientist. You have to go for any kind of healthcare needs, especially when it is disease oriented. You have to go to the doctor. You could go to an Ayurveda doctor or to a doctor from modern medicine, but you will have to consult a doctor. Please do not go for any home remedies.
I'd like to know publication opportunities at TKDL for IKS for TK research.
Can you read the question again?
Yes, ma'am. So the question is how to know publication opportunities at TKDL regarding IKS research.
No, we do not, take any recent publications. We go for the classical text. The publications could be printed, text of recent times, but these are largely old books that have been written many, many hundreds of years ago. In terms of publication of recent research in the context of our IKS or traditional knowledge, we have a journal called the Indian Journal of Traditional Knowledge. This is done by one of our CSIR laboratories, National Institute for Science Communication and Policy Research. You can look at that particular publication. And you also have many other journals from within the country and outside also. Say, for example, if you're talking of Ayurveda, the Central Council for Ayurvedic Research and Sciences, CCRAS, they are publishing journals. Similarly, you also have from the All India Institute of Ayurveda, you also have from the other councils of Unani and Siddha also. So depending on the topic of your research, you can identify the journals that would be able to publish your research article in those journals.
Yes, here I would like to include that IKS division also has made Bharatiya Jnana Sarita. So you can also look into this. You can publish your book and articles, everything. So IKS, you will find on our IKS website, IKS Jnana Sarita, Bharatiya Jnana Sarita. Ma'am, is there any platform where we can access the e-books of ancient books?
You
From
do
Dr.
have this
Narendra.
internetarchive.org. You also have Rare Book Society of India. You also have the IGNCA where they have, the books made available, especially some rare books. And you also have now recently some of the, Indian books are being made available on many other platforms also. So you do a Google search, you generally get the appropriate things. Some of them are still paid books. You'll have to buy them.
Yes. Validation increases Shraddha in IKS. Where can I access validation in Indian context? As in case of Australian Kakadu or South Korean cultural traditional city to get the detail of their work.
You do a Google
Where
search
can I
and
access
yeah, the best
validation?
is do a Google search and you will get the appropriate things because even I did all these Google searches and in my presentation will be which will be shared by Piyush Ji in the Google Drive. You will see the references mentioned. So you can first, access the references therein, and then you can go and do further back references. Or
Ma'am, in the interactive session also, I will collect all those questions.
So there is one question from Dr. Vinod Sahu regarding IPRs.
okay.
So we'll take it tomorrow. So we have a session on IPRs. So first we
Yes.
discuss the
And I think this, I also was reading that question. You will have to wait for maybe 2 days. I think Viji would be able to better address in
yes.
the context of traditional knowledge. So tomorrow you will have a session on intellectual property rights, more from a general perspective. So you would appreciate the general aspects of intellectual property rights. And day after tomorrow and the following day, you have specifically on traditional knowledge, and especially the last day is on tribal knowledge and oral traditional knowledge, where it is still not codified. And if in case you put it in public domain, what would be the, the pros and cons of documenting oral traditional knowledge and so on and so forth. Just hold on to your horses, and in another 2 days, you'll get to know more about it.
Yes. There is a question from Dr. Charulata. Dr. Charulata said, what is the method of documentation of any traditional knowledge or practices in any community?
Yeah, so typically when we talk of community knowledge, and here we assume that this particular traditional knowledge is not yet codified and put it into a text form anyway. So in this context, documenting would be very important. First and foremost is the prior informed consent of that knowledge holder. You need to take the consent of the knowledge holder before you even embark on documenting. So you have to be clear about, what would be your objectives, and would the community knowledge holder would be is he or she also inclined to sharing the knowledge. So thereafter you get into documenting. Again, on this particular topic, I would say please wait for another 2 days. You will get to know more about this particular topic because we have a very detailed lecture on this aspect as well.
There is a question from Dr. Manjula. May I know may I know hydroponics drugs in TKDL? Hydroponics drug. Hydroponics drugs.
That I don't know because I'm not sure I understand the question. Maybe you could write to me at head.tkdl@csir.res.in. We will look into.
The same question I think we have addressed. So what are the checkpoints of validation of ancient text in India?
So
Checkpoints of
checkpoints, there's a
validation.
lot that you have to do, especially when you talk of drugs and pharmaceuticals and all that, because you don't know the plants may have also differently over these 1,000 years. So it would be good to validate the claims that are being made in our ancient texts. But having said that, there are many drugs that are still being used, and there is efficacy already documented. So we could go ahead with that. But in the context of, again, cultural expressions, dance form, music, arts, these are all living traditions. landscape architecture, that is trees to plant where and why. So I had given you many books names, So if you look at the books, you would find almost in every book, there would be general practices on crop husbandry, animal husbandry and all that. And they would also touch upon the landscape, where to plant, how to plant. They also look at the directions and so on and so forth. So you would get this